Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to have all of you here. I'm Aarti Utwani from Helium Foundation. Helium is the world's largest decentralized wireless networks. Our coverage is in over 77 towns and cities. There are more than hundreds of thousands of nodes deployed all over the world. Very excited to be here with Himanshu, a visionary reinventing internet in India. So very excited to talk more into it. So before we get into it, if you talk about DePIN, you can't really miss talking about Helium. But what is DePIN? Apparently, we didn't learn our lessons from NFTs, naming after horrible acronyms, but that's okay. I was really surprised to see somebody in the audience knows the full form, so yay. DePIN is kind of the buzzword that everybody in the conference is talking about. I was at Bangalore before this, and really, after DeFi, I feel like DePIN is the buzzword. So let's get into it for people who are not very familiar with the acronym, Decentralized Physical Infrastructure Network. It is kind of an infrastructure that is built out by different cohorts of people. It's very similar to PM Wani, but think about PM Wani and everybody who is contributing to build this network is also paying for the data, but getting rewarded in back to provide the coverage to this global network. So Helium is fully decentralized. I'm going to turn it over to Himanshu to get an overview of what Witness Chain is. And they have really cool technologies like proof of bandwidth, proof of diligence. So yeah, let's get right into it.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. Just a small correction. Someone said I'm teaching at IISc. We don't teach so much at IISc. It's a graduate school. Last time I taught was maybe 2.5 years back or something. But thank you for this. And DePIN is a very interesting word because it keeps on changing. Last year, maybe the right word would have been DY, which was more restrictive, and then DePIN, and now DePIN has, I think, captured the attention of a broader audience. Before I get into DePIN, Witness Chain is building watchtower network, which we believe will be the first line of defense for roll-ups to begin with, and many other things. The role of a watchtower network is just to raise an alarm. Just to raise an alarm when something goes wrong, but in order to raise an alarm, you have to be watching. So for roll-ups, you have to be watching the state. You have to be watching what's going on, and you have to be watching when nothing is going wrong. So that's where this proof of diligence comes into picture, where we incentivize the watchtowers to watch when nothing is going wrong. If you start rewarding them only when something goes wrong, then basically it's all useless. So that's one part that we have built there. In fact, the watchtower network goes deeper. It need not only watch the state of a roll-up. We started from the infrastructure side, so we watch things on the infrastructure side as well. For example, we can verify the location of the validators. We can ensure that they are physically decentralized. And that's where this connection with DePIN starts coming into picture, where we watch network state as well. We have many innovations on the network state watching side. We have a decentralized proof of speed. So we all do speed tests, but it's centralized. We have a decentralized speed test. We have a proof of location. And it's all bundled into this network of network of watchtowers.
That's pretty cool. Something about DePIN, a lot of people these days ask me, what does crypto is really used for? What does this primitive permissionless money really, enable? And I think DePINs make such an excellent answer to what these networks really enable. You are paying for the coverage, and at the same time, you are being rewarded to build this coverage that anybody can use, right? Anybody can come to your network and validate if what my provider at telecom, I'm sure a lot of people in the audience, they receive this message from the telecom providers. You have used 20 GB data, but you have 10 more GB data left. Tell me more about how witness chain is, helping users like me. Like, I don't know if Geo is telling the truth or not. I don't know if I've used 5 GB or 10 GB. I have a terrible experience. I've been ranting all about it in the conference that I have Geo internet, but it sucks in India. And then you told me earlier in the lounge that I'm on roaming and that's how it works. So yeah, do you come in as a validator where you help users understand how the backend works and how much internet I've really used?
Right. So this part of witness chain is what we call proof of bandwidth, a proof system to verify the kind of things that you are talking about. And it's applicable to broadly, even beyond mobile operators. You mentioned PM Wani in India. For those of you who don't know, India has been a little bit forward-looking in decentralized networks. In 2016, we launched something called PM Wani, which enables anyone to resell bandwidth in a Wi-Fi form. So typically, you need an ISP license to sell bandwidth in India, but that licensing condition was taken off. And if you have a Wi-Fi hotspot and you register it as a PM Wani hotspot, then you can sell bandwidth from your shop. A Panwala can sell it. That's allowed in India. And this network currently has about 200,000 hotspots. So you're talking about Jio. Of course, Jio is a regulated telco, and Airtel is a regulated telco. So they will try their best to give good service because it's just a monopoly or a duopoly and depends a lot of reputation. It's a different aspect that you're not getting the experience that you expect. But they're regulated. Now imagine a decentralized world where we are using a shopkeeper to buy a network. And this guy has no incentive to give very good quality because the relationship you will have is ephemeral. You will just go there for a day and maybe you don't go there the next day. In this case, this proof system becomes even more important. You can't trust that data. That what if you just watch a movie and says you have consumed your 20 GB data? What happens then? So for that, what we do is this proof of service. It's a research paper we wrote with Sachin Katti, Pramod, a few of us. It's a research paper we wrote, which is now also a sort of a product. What it does is it does two-sided measurement, very simple idea. Typically, consumption of network is measured from one side, network side, but the user can also mention it easily. Can we do a two-sided measurement and reconcile it more? So you should also see from your device level that what data have you consumed. This is technically challenging because these two measurements will not typically match because of how wireless protocols are designed and their retransmissions. So one has to take that into account and make sure that we give the right view of what the two-sided measurements are. This is just the beginning, right? One can ask for different things. One can ask for how has been your quality of service. So far, mobile networks do not guarantee quality of service. If you have heard about things like VoLTE or video over LTE, those are basically named for specific quality of service guarantee things. So very few quality of service guaranteed products are there. So in principle, nothing is violated when you don't get good experience. Your contract specifically says in a telco that we do not guarantee any quality of service. You are basically on a default bearer. So there is no quality of service guarantee that is being violated. If you start giving those guarantees and if you start verifying them, that's where this proof system will come into picture.
That's pretty interesting. Since we are speaking about decentralization of wireless network, I have a question. So how does watchtowers, proof of bandwidth, proof of diligence, these innovations that Witness Chain has worked on come in place with trust and safety of these networks?
Right. So before I mention how this part has worked from Witness Chain side, just one shout out to Helium. It's the most inspirational network for us, and I'll tell you why. Before Helium, if you try to get funding to build a wireless network, be a WISP, I don't know how many of you have been trying that. There are there must be 100,000 failed startup in that space. It's very hard to convince people that this is something needed and one should fund this. What Helium showed was that there was a ground-up demand for this kind of thing. I think it's the most decentralized blockchain, if someone may say, at least when they were L1, the most decentralized one, because the validators were the small homeowners. We interacted with a lot of them, actually. They were so passionate about the project. They are so passionate about the project. Now, what Helium showed is that one can have a crowdsourced network, so to say, built in a way that the business is decentralized. Technology has been decentralized for 2 decades now. That has been a researcher's dream forever, decentralized networks. So if you tell me decentralized network, I would have thought that you have decentralized the technology. What Helium managed to do and trying to do is decentralize the business. Business has always been centralized in things like networks because the idea has been that you need a monopoly to build a technology that deep. Now, Helium challenged that idea, and it says maybe we can have other structures where coverage can be decentralized. People support by decentralizing the coverage. Hopefully, the operations won't be decentralized. That will be a disaster, actually. Operations should be centralized because it requires a lot of expertise. But the coverage part was decentralized. So it went well. Our belief is that when you move from Helium's IoT network to a more complex like Helium's 5G network, then the problem will become more stringent to verify that each host of these hotspots is doing their job. And that's where players like Witness Chain come into picture, who provide a layer of watchtowers dedicated to just watching that these guys are doing their job. Your current protocol for proof of coverage, for example, just to take Helium's example, is a peer-to-peer protocol where nodes double up as verifying the network's thing and serving the network. This will become very hard when this measurement of network performance becomes more technical. And that's where the dedicated watchtower pool can serve Helium network. At least that's the philosophy with which we are moving. But we are also a watchtower for other things. But in the case of DePIN, we believe that this single shared pool of watchtower network will offer a trust-free, decentralized pool of challengers for different kind of DePIN projects. And this network itself is secured by Ethereum Trust because our watchtowers stake in Ethereum using EigenLayer's restaking primitive. This is another breakthrough that happens which helped us bring security to our watchtower networks. Now we can get Ethereum stake. Ethereum stake is now programmable through, I know you are a Solana maxi and we are neutral, but we use Ethereum Trust to build a watchtower network. But we also have a Solana client, so we have no preferences that way. But our trust is from Ethereum.
Yeah, I mean, I am, prior to working for Helium, I was in a DeFi protocol called Re.xyz. Re was a reinsurance. So very similar to Lloyds of London, but built on Avalanche. So I have nothing against Avalanche. It's just I made my switch to DePIN because personally, I am all in for, my opinion is everybody should have access to internet. We are, in the era of Starlink, and out of all the places, I have internet issues in Bangalore, which claims to be the Silicon Valley of India. Like, I am disappointed. But, well, going back to our conversation around Helium and how you mentioned the Helium mobile network, last night, Helium launched $20 all across United States, all data, like everything included, and we do have really good coverage. So switching gears, tell me more about when you are building this infrastructure of watchtowers, what are some challenges that you see currently with building that initial demand and building that initial coverage?
Oh, yeah, DePIN, this is the hardest part. Because in DePIN projects, a lot of groundwork is required to build that community who will actually buy that equipment, right, and host it. So this is one challenge for DePIN projects, and we were taking that route for some time. But then very quickly, at least for us, we took this approach that we will have no specialized hardware. It will be only a software-based challenge ecosystem. In fact, we don't want to lock the hardware at all. That's why we are calling it trust-free. It has to be a protocol which you are free to change to your will. And but I know players like Helium cannot do that. And the only way to do it is build a ground-up community. But I have some pointers there, and these are also lessons we learned in PM1E. It's very important to have a robust stack. It's very important to have a working stack. Because you may be able to initially sell a weak stack, okay, hardware stack. People will buy it, you'll make some money. Very quickly, that interaction will fizzle out. In fact, if your stack is weak, if you don't get good vendors in a DePIN kind of project and people have bought your hardware, then I think that's a done case very early on. You don't get too many chances there. Happened, for example, in PM Vani. The initial stack was cheap, but did not work. So don't run after the price point of the stack in the beginning is an important lesson that not applies to us, but applies to, I think, broader DePIN project. Have a very good, robust stack. I think second point which I mentioned is also a learning which can be applied to other DePIN projects is we are decentralizing the business. We are decentralizing the ownership of business. We are not decentralizing necessarily the tech operation. That may be a much harder problem. Don't expect hosts of base stations in their home to be able to manage the direction of those antennas when wind blows. That's a technically challenging problem. It requires a lot of software support, a lot of operation support. Don't necessarily think of DIY for every part of it. Maybe you can keep centralized vendors to help you host those things. That's another lesson, applies to all DePIN projects, be it government, be it Helium. And third one and the last one is at the end, this whole thing has to work. The network has to deliver the traffic that you're talking about. This is the third thing, I think, that at the end we cannot forget that. The network has to deliver what it's supposed to deliver, be it geolocation, be it Wi-Fi access, be it 5G access, IoT access. The network has to work. It should be able to handle that traffic. It should be able to address those requests that come to it, obviously. These are the three things I feel. So basically, it looks like there are no shortcuts in this DePIN framework.
Yeah, well, this is how civilization really works, right? Like, it is the coordination of everybody to be on the same page, contribute, and build this global network that we are building on. So, let's switch gears a little bit. We spoke about witness chain. Throughout the entire day, right? You and I, we've been listening about, DePIN is the next big thing. Today's theme is DePIN is going to bring the next billion users to blockchain. It's the buzzword. Like, I want to know, what are your views? You just mentioned at the end it should work. And somewhere there is a belief that it is going in the direction, but what are your thoughts? Will DePIN really be the next blockchain technology that brings in billions of users as they are talking about it?
Absolutely. So billions of users. I think many people are attributed for this saying, but I think Yogi Berra is my favorite attribution for this one. Prediction is hard, especially about the future. So I don't know who will be the next billion users and where they come from. But I'll tell you two parts of that story. One is the global story and one is the India story, because India's story is somewhat special. I'll also defend that bad network complaint that you're doing about Bangalore. So the global story is, I think DePIN projects are the first one where no one is asking, is it useful? What is the utility of this blockchain project? I think there's certain core appeal to that whole ethic, that to begin with, it's useful, then everything else. Decentralization comes over it. To begin with, this service exists, and to begin with, it's useful. No one is questioning if it's useful. Another part is that DePIN is a more ground-up movement. As I said, I would put Helium as one of the most decentralized chains because the validators were homeowners. And I've spoken to some of them. They're so passionate, right? They're building a business around it. Of course, bear markets shift some beliefs, but they were building, and there'll be tax attorneys in Midwest US. There'll be farm owners in Midwest US, and they're adding another revenue stream to whatever their daily income is. And that's how they were treating it. It was their hobby projects, and they like putting it up. They like maintaining it. They take pride in how well their hotspots are performing. And I see similar passion coming up, let's say, in a Filecoin community when Filecoin has very cool projects and we are participating in some of them. And it's sort of, again, sci-fi stuff. I can't believe that one can decentralize these kind of foundational infrastructure. So that is one part, a global ground-up appeal. It's to begin with driven by people who show their interest by buying equipment. That's very interesting. So that's one part. So it is a more ground-up movement. And I would say entry point is also easy because it's natural to understand. Blockchain is more abstract. DePIN is more closer to ground. So that's one part. Now the India story of it, which is where the numbers come in. To begin with, I will say one point there. So you're not happy with your performance of your network in Bangalore. But what's the price point? How much did you pay for it?
I paid less than 300 INR for a
Yeah.
prepaid
So
plan.
that's the point. The cost of data in India is minuscule. That's why it's very hard for us to see any use case of, let's say, a WISP, wireless ISPs, because it's less than $10 for unlimited data, $10 a month. Now, even when you say that Helium will bring price of data down in the US, you talk about numbers like $25. It's already less than $10 here on mobile. 2 GB per day limit is there, but fine. Even the Wi-Fi data prices are not very high. So India, data is not a luxury in India. It's a fundamental right. It is what a shopkeeper, a flower seller uses to get payment for its flowers. Okay? It is not meant to just watch movies, which, by the way, people watch. So many experiments are done. The hunger of data in India. So people did experiments by giving, let's say, people in villages who are not supposed to need that much data, 100 GB data for 5 days. Okay? And they use a large part of it. And because so the thing about data in India is if you give anyone any amount of data, they'll consume it, no matter where they are. Okay? There's a huge, infinite demand for data. So the bottleneck is the network, not the data. In India, government understands this. All governments can disagree on many things, all political parties. One thing they agree on is that digitization was a good step. It went across parties, right? All parties contributed to it, came around in 10 years. And this is the future. Digitization, digitally governed democracy is the future. So if you start by saying that, then infrastructure has to grow very fast. Now, growing infrastructure is difficult. Growing infrastructure fast is impossible, very hard. Taking to the last mile is very, very hard. And that's where DePIN projects come in. They grow first in a organic manner. In fact, if you unify them, if you discover a use case, my belief is DePIN will start disappearing. The moment you tell me that the market size is $1 billion, right? Then there are companies like Jio with very deep pockets who would like to buy that market away right away. Okay? It's only because it's not discovered yet. So DePIN projects do this tremendous job of discovering markets, which may not be there. No one knows how much money is to be made by providing Wi-Fi to third-tier cities in India and to villages in India. Currently, it's a charity project of the governments, and rightly so, because this will have downstream effects. But DePIN is the way in which one can discover that market. And hope is that once that market is discovered, then more serious equipment providers, more serious players will start serving that market, as happened with shampoos in India. So no one knew before Hindustan Liver that one can sachetize shampoo and sell them for 2 rupees, and it will make such a grand revenue. Very few success stories are there in bottom of the pyramid selling. DePIN is, I think, going in that direction. That's how we see PM Wani. We see that it may have its problem because it was difficult to build a stack like that for that price point, but at least it's ground up. At least a person in remote place can just put it today, and that's the power of DePIN, I think. It's ground up, it's organic, it starts by people, and it discovers market slowly. The market need not exist when it comes in.
Yeah, I have a bunch of things to just add another layer, pun intended, another layer to what you just said. So agreed, right? DePIN is kind of PM Wani, but decentralized in terms of it just makes that transaction of the network simpler for the end users like you and me, right? We are paying for the data that we are using. At the same time, we are getting rewarded to use that data. That's how I would like to see it. Going back to, DePIN's is the way to finding what next market is out there. I remember Sammy from Masari came up with this acronym DePIN just a few months ago, and I looked at the chart, and there were all different kinds of networks. There are mobile networks, there are geospatial networks, there are compute networks. These are like really easy to install infrastructure. For example, I'd like to give an example of this IoT network, this ecosystem partner called Demo, which is just a small device like a pen drive or a flash drive that you put it in your car and you are just driving around at the same time you are earning Demo tokens. And what you provide in return is you are just mapping and you are telling the provider, like, this is how the roads are. And this device is helping users who are using this device understand how their car functions, where the car is always at, sending these small packets. So it's really not rocket science. DePIN is very easy to use. infrastructure that a lot of people are installing this hardwares on their, like helium hotspots, for example. They are plugging in their, apartments on top of their roofs. Some of helium community members, they like climb up all over the mountains and they just provide internet coverage to the region. The builders of DePIN infrastructure are really not thinking of crypto first. They are thinking of how to really provide that access of supply that they are creating, because there's clearly a demand out there. So since we have, in the essence of the time, I have you, and I really wanted to touch base on you as a professor at the Indian Institute of Science, and you started this blockchain club. So I know a lot of developers are here. I wanted to learn a little bit about, you believe in the mission of internet, and you are also a volunteer with PM Vani. So tell me a little bit about this journey and what really drives you.
I can tell you about ISC Blockchain Club. That's a plugin I would love to do. I'm too young to tell my own journey. I don't want to talk about my own journey. But I think you touched upon the internet part, right? So I think this opportunity of blockchains is very interesting from India's perspective as well. And I feel aligned with it, right? So we all use the internet of information. And now this internet of trust is coming up, right? And this time it won't be sponsored by a government like US government. This time it's sponsored by many decentralized sponsoring, many VCs, many different things. And hopefully the rewards will be similarly decentralized when they come in. This is central to how India operates. I think India is meant for blockchains. As I said, very fancy DeFi projects are floating around with the fruit sellers, who every morning take this 1,000 rupee loan, maybe 2,000, and return in the evening, okay? And that's a trust network which exists already in India. So we do very fancy DeFi every day here. One gap I found was that we have a strong group of cryptographers, let's say in IISc and other premier institutes in India. We have a very good developer pool in a conference like this, right? Who are builders, and the whole world looks to them to hire them and to bring those projects up. One simple goal we had in IISc Blockchain Club was to bridge that gap. That can we have deep dive sessions, let's say, of topics which are rooted in cryptography or deep software engineering, but reach out to the broader developer community who may not have seen the same depth. That's the only goal of IISc Blockchain Club, that just to combine these two communities. So if any one of you is either based out of Bangalore or comes to Bangalore often, you should participate in some of our deep dive sessions. Yeah, that's what I would like to say about IISc Blockchain Club.
Well, that's amazing. I would like the audience, if you have any questions, we have some time for questions.
I think this is an interesting session about DePIN. I mean, honestly speaking, this is the first time I'm hearing that. So, with my research in the background, like I come from a telecom background where I studied wireless networks and working in the network engineering space right now. I want to understand the workflow here, like especially with DePIN. How like the users would be on board? Can you go across like the workflow part of it, and how a DePIN project starts? I mean, so that we as users get an understanding of more into the conceptualization of it.
Yeah, maybe a very high level view I can give. One simple thing is that you can think of DePIN, at least in the context of networks, as associated with a AAA part of the network. Okay, the boring part of network. Authentication, authorization, forget authorization, and accounting. So let's think of authentication and accounting. So first thing DePIN projects do is take away the authentication part and decentralize your identity. Natural in blockchain, right? So you are not with Jio or Airtel, or you don't have an ISP A, B, C, D. It's a universal network. Anyone should be able to access it without doing a very detailed KYC, right? In the Indian context. Same for PM Money. No KYC needed. KYC is separate from that identity there. So one part is take out the authentication piece and have a blockchain identity. Second, very interesting part is the accounting part. Accounting is the most murky part of telco. She complained about it. She doesn't know what's going on. No one knows actually. They can't tell you either. Only during roaming they are very careful. When you are here and you're going to China, then China sends all the way traffic back to India because I don't trust anyone for my accounting. That's why you can access Google if you're in China but you're on roaming, because the traffic is coming all the way back to your home network. So that accounting piece is another thing which goes out. It should be decentralized. Now, how do you do that? It should be trust-free accounting. I don't want to trust my provider for accounting. These are the two parts. And then just to have trust-free accounting, now you need a lot of other things. How do I know that this service was good? I want to have some reliable accounting. You, as a telco, are governed by a lot of regulations because you got the spectrum license that ties you to a lot of regulation. Or before you got an ISP license, that inherently requires you to have certain quality of service. If you build an open network of any such service, who guarantees the quality? So we have to play around rational players and incentive alignment for quality. We have to make sure that the quality is proved to you very regularly so that you remain incentivized to keep using that service. That is the basic idea of DePIN, that whatever service it is will prove to you quality more frequently, and you will be happy to continue with the service because there are no regulators.
I think that is perfectly put. I think I get the context here. Just as a follow-up as you mentioned about regulations and compliance part, what kind of compliance and regulation framework applies to DePIN? Is it the legacy framework gets in, or are there certain regulations that comes into picture?
I will let you take that one.
So this is depends on the country, depends on the, but DePIN is not just networks. So in terms of networks, India has given one play around in the PM1E framework. Depends on what you're touching in DePIN. Depends on that, right? If you start saying that I want to build a network of satellites operating on E-band, which is decentralized, highly regulated space. E-band is a regulated space. So looks at which band you're touching. If you touch one of the defense bands, for example, then that's a very high, that's like you can't touch naval frequencies and say I'll have radars which are decentralized. So it depends on what you are operating in, and it can be an issue if you try to be too innovative in DePIN. You may quickly touch up very regulated spaces, yeah.
Yeah, just to add to what he mentioned, so in context to Helium, so Helium's IoT network is built on this protocol called LoRaWAN. It is the low-power, long-range protocol for its IoT networks. It is kind of permissionless. So if you are using the network in Europe for the IoT, you can also use it in the US. There are some IoT hotspots that I've seen that have started to build in India. So the whole idea is you can permissionlessly use this coverage that is built by people, since it's a people-powered network. But in the essence of time, I would love to wrap this conversation up. Thank you, everybody, for joining in. I and Himanshu are going to be at the speaker lounge for any follow-up questions that can come from the audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aarti. Thank you so much, Himanshu.